Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. As we arrive at the Miami Grand Prix weekend, it seems that all signs continue to point towards Adrian Newey joining Ferrari. Some very insightful comments made by Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc on his future in the sport. They could have easily ducked the question, played down the Newey rumours like Fernando Alonso have done, but no, Lewis Hamilton appears to know something that the rest of us do not. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Firstly, we talked about this probably a week or so ago now, and apparently this continues to be a rumour in the paddock that Logan Sargeant might have his last race here in Miami. Now I will say, a couple of years ago when Latifi wasn't having the best time, there were rumours all the time that Latifi was about to get dropped. It never actually happened, but there are reasons to believe that it may be a sensible decision right about now. This depends on whether Andrea Kimi Antonelli, who has done a stellar job in those Mercedes tests over the last few days at Imola, is going to be able to get his super license. He has all the points he needs, Antonelli. He's not 18, however, as Verstappen wasn't, of course, when he came into the sport. So there would be required a waiver from the FIA to make this occur. And would that open the floodgates to other under-18 drivers trying to achieve the same thing? Possibly. Would it be good PR for the FIA and for the sport? Quite probably yes. Italian driver making a debut in Italy on Imola for Williams. It makes a lot of sense. Whether this is achieved is another question, but apparently these are now like proper paddock rumours that Sargent's last Grand Prix could be Miami, and of course he's from Florida, isn't he? So they wouldn't even have to fly him out of there if they dropped him after this weekend. If Sargent has a great weekend, that would be very interesting if they would get rid of him, but that is still a rumour that is going around. Daniel Ricciardo as well, if you guys remember the Stroll incident from back in China that he was not especially happy with, and for good reason. Stroll actually was asked about this, and he said, well, whatever I've said to Daniel is not for this room. And then Ricciardo says he didn't even apologise to me. He clearly doesn't think that he's done anything wrong. So it's another one of these things. We know the team as well, like, defended Lance. And this is one of those other reasons why if I'm Adrian Newey, I'm like, do I really want to join the outfit which is effectively Stroll orchestrated? Might not make that much sense. There are better options for Newey out there, and we'll discuss them in a second. Carlos Sainz. We said yesterday that there were rumours that Sainz had rejected the Audi offer, or at least not responded to them by the respective deadline. Sainz actually was asked the question on this yesterday and said, no, that's not the case. I've not declined anything. But of course, he's not going to say anything, is he? Because it's going to put himself in a weaker position if he says anything publicly. But there's an interesting piece here from Formula Uno, and they say that, yeah, Sainz hasn't necessarily declined the offer. It's more so he hasn't responded by the deadline Audi wanted him to respond to. So yesterday the rumour was that, well, they're just going to sign an alternative alongside Hülkenberg and won't even bother with Carlos Sainz anymore. But maybe Audi will think, oh, you know, let's just wait a little bit longer to see if we can actually get him, depending on what happens elsewhere. But, you know, Sainz is not signing a deal that is on the table, right? So in some sense, he has rejected some advances, and that depends on the Red Bull situation. The interesting part is, for me, is that the Red Bull situation for Sainz is maybe more dependent on what happens with Max than it does with Perez. Because according to rumours today, Horner wants Sainz in to protect himself if Max were to leave. And, you know, of course, it's a prize piece on the market. Audi must wait if it wants the best possible pair of drivers. So this is the point, and maybe it affects Perez as well, but the belief is now that Horner is concerned, given the Newey situation, that Max may depart. Maybe even if not immediately, he may depart a year from now for 2026 if the feeling is that the engine preparation for Red Bull isn't as good, because next year's car I'm sure is still going to be a rocket ship, right, even without Newey. But 2026, when you've got a new set of regulations with radical changes, still ground effect but different complications, that's where Newey, you know, makes his bread, right, in those particular instances, and he will likely be working for another team at the time. So Red Bull's technical team will be tested by that, and if the rumours are true that there is a feeling that their engine project isn't quite up to snuff with where some of the other teams are, maybe it makes sense for Max to depart at that point. He may depart before then, but Mercedes can't build a good car right now, so it doesn't maybe make much sense. But if Horner thinks Max might leave in the next 2 years, then getting Sainz now makes sense anyway, because even if Max doesn't leave immediately and you've got Sainz there instead of Perez as a backup, then if Max were to leave, you at least have Sainz rather than Sainz signing a 3-year deal at Audi and therefore you can't get him anymore. So that is the debate that teams are currently having. This, by the way, is Adrian Newey, and we have much to say on this man today. This is a graphic that they put up yesterday on Sky Sports, which makes him look like a driver, really. But yeah, 253 poles, 217 Grand Prix victories. So, putting Lewis Hamilton and Michael Schumacher's records in the mud. Just kind of funny the way this graphic is laid out, but of course it's not wrong. And, well, we don't need to say any more on this man. We know what his CV speaks for itself, obviously. There was a very interesting statement they made, and I would have shared the clip, but for some reason, the VOD of that Sky Sports pre-show has been deleted on YouTube. But this is what Craig Slater had to say, and I thought that it was absolutely fascinating to hear the situation at Red Bull, because he's been there 19 years. There has been instances pre-Red Bull of Newey having disagreements with those that he's worked with, not being happy about the working environment, and clearly the friction, the civil war at Red Bull has contributed to this situation. But listen to this bit that Craig Slater said on Sky Sports. There are some in the design office who are quite pleased that he is moving on. They found his working methods capricious, which kind of means like, maybe unstable, not so well defined, impulsive in some way, and now they have a chance to prove that it isn't all about Adrian Newey. And Newey, we believe at least, has the chance to prove that it kind of was all about Adrian Newey. But there is a deeper history to this. We shouldn't put all the reasons for the departure down to the controversy surrounding Horner at the moment. So, very interesting. But to hear the fact that, look, we know that Newey is a genius of sublime quality, and often people of that character are not necessarily going to, they're going to clash maybe with other people that want to do things in a different way, especially when Red Bull were on the trajectory to bring in, Washe, Balbo, Waterhouse, and these other technical heads that they now have. So the belief is that some at Red Bull are happy to be rid of Newey and, are actually happy to be able to prove what they can do themselves. And there were also rumours the other day that Newey felt like he wasn't being respected internally. So some very interesting behind the scenes things there that makes me think that Newey isn't just going to step away and retire. And there's another reason why I believe that in a second. So the words were coming out of the drivers yesterday on Adrian Newey, and it was really interesting to hear what Danny Rick had to say, having worked with him, and other drivers that have worked with Newey in the past. And even Perez said this, that Newey will have immediate impact wherever he goes next. He can also influence the strategies, the setup of the cars. So sure, Newey designs the cars. Okay, he doesn't design a whole thing. He comes up with the conceptual concepts behind the cars and does a rather good job in his history, but also he has other factors that make him a very useful man to work alongside. But Max Verstappen was downplaying the departure. You might expect this to be the case, but I thought Max's words were quite interesting on the different role that Newey has taken in the team over the last few years and why he isn't, the be-all and end-all at Red Bull. I don't think Red Bull will, massively regress immediately with Newey's departure, but I certainly think that it hurts, and this is what Max says, that obviously, I wanted Adrian to stay, and I told him to that effect, but it's not like Verstappen was on his knees begging. He was like, look, I'd like you to stay, and he was incredibly important to the success that Red Bull have had, but over time his role has changed a bit. Whether that's because he wanted it to change, in parts probably, whether that's because he was getting forced into doing things that he wasn't necessarily so keen with. As he says, his role has evolved. A lot of good people have come into the team. They've strengthened the whole department. Of course, I would have preferred him to stay because you can always rely on his experience, and as a person, he's a great guy to chat and relate to, but I also really trust the technical team we have outside of Adrian is very, very strong, and they've shown us that for the last few years with how competitive the car is. So there is a debate on how important Adrian Newey was for, let's say, this year's car and potentially last year's car. And in hindsight, it definitely feels like this Newey departure has been coming. And there was even talk on the Sky Sports show yesterday that this could have happened a year ago, but they did sign a 12-month extension that has, of course, now come to an end. Now, Verstappen also talked about the rumoured mega offer from Mercedes and kind of fires shots back at Toto Wolff here because, as he says, my future is within Red Bull at the moment. So Verstappen he's usually pretty honest, right? Sure, he's PR trained. He says things that are wise to say, but I think where he can, he tries to say what he means. So yeah, the future is within Red Bull at the moment, even if that were to be the case, this 150 million euro offer. So he doesn't deny it, which is kind of interesting. Like, there's a rumour that Mercedes want to offer him 150 million euros a year and ambassadorship and whatever it takes to get him into that Mercedes outfit to replace Lewis Hamilton, either now or in 2026, where he might replace Russell, potentially, if Antonelli was to come into that car and impress for next season. And Verstappen doesn't deny the potential lucrative offer that he may have been given, but he says even if that was the case, it would not make a difference. Even 250 million euros wouldn't matter. I'm happy with what I'm earning. I know myself, if I'm driving with a P5 or P6, you get quite grumpy with yourself. It's always about performances at the end of the day. Everyone knows that, and Toto also knows that. So basically saying, fix your effing car, Toto, and then I might think about it type thing, which is probably the correct situation, to be fair. So Max says, look, performance is the factor, which of course is what he would say, but if performance is the factor, then, and if Red Bull aren't going to be looking so good in 2026, then of course there is still a debate to be had. So what for the future of Adrian Newey? Today, a remarkable story emerging that Williams are in conversation to sign Newey. This would be a real out of left field option, because I think it's quite clear that he's not going to go to Aston, he's not going to go to McLaren. Apparently he doesn't especially rate Toto Wolff for that Mercedes project, so that kind of leaves Ferrari or retirement from the sport. Or it leaves Williams. I know people have thrown Williams around as a name because he was there before, had lots of success at Williams. It's not the same Williams that he departed all those years ago. It's not the same team. The people in charge aren't the same people. It's Williams in name. It's maybe not the Williams that he once knew. But nonetheless, it is an attractive prospect because money for Newey is probably not the biggest factor, right? Like, he's made enough money. It's like Ferrari, Aston, they can offer him whatever he wants. Like 100 million a year, 25 million a year. It's probably not massively moving the needle at the end of the day. It's just, he's just big money. He's there to design cars and obviously challenge himself. And he did say that when he exited Red Bull, that, well, I'm looking to seek new challenges. If there was one challenge, the biggest challenge of all to take on would be to go to Williams and try and build them a car that can get a podium or, compete for race wins or whatever. Because even Newey, if you don't have the resources, like, making massive progress overnight is not necessarily going to be possible. But I'm sure that if he joined Williams, they could build a very competitive car, or at least a car that was up there in consideration. So why would you not, if you're Williams, talk to Newey, try and, nostalgia bait him into coming back to the team? And apparently James Vowles had talks with Newey to persuade him to come. They could give him some ownership stake, I imagine, some things that he wanted back when he was at Williams before and was never granted. So there are some reasons why it makes sense, but it's just, Ferrari makes way more sense, I think, is like kind of the conclusion that I have, is that, sure, have the conversations. And also, this is the point that I wanted to make earlier. James Vowles and Newey having conversations over a future at Williams. Does that sound like a man who's about to retire? I mean, let's be honest. You're always going to have the Ferrari conversations. Like, if Fred Vasseur, John Elkann say, hey, we want to bring you to Maranello, or we want you to work from where you want to work from, and you can be in Maranello part of the time, whatever it takes, Buongiorno, Mr. Adrian Newey, please help us out. You're always going to entertain those conversations. But if you're then discussing with Williams, that doesn't sound to me that he's thinking about retiring if he's entertaining negotiations with Williams on a potential situation, because, you're always going to talk with teams, because, then you can, just from a business POV, can find yourself a more attractive offer wherever that might be elsewhere. So the teams and the drivers were talking about it as well, obviously, yesterday, and we're largely being asked the question, is Newey joining your team? What's happening next with Newey? Would you like him? Would you want him in the team? And all this type of stuff. So various drivers gave various opinions on this. George Russell says, well, it doesn't really change my life. If he comes to Mercedes, nice. If there's a secret that he comes to Mercedes. So he was relatively tight-lipped on this. And Alonso was relatively tight-lipped as well and said, well, we've got a good team of engineers. We'll see that quote in a second. The Ferrari boys, however, were they were all over this. And I think they quite easily could have given a similar response to how, let's say Alonso does, and we'll see in a second. Well, we've got a good technical team. It would be lovely to have Newey, but, we're moving in a good direction anyway, and all this type of stuff. Whereas the Ferrari guys, they were asked about Newey, and they said, obviously, I'd be very excited to have Adrian in the team. And what caught the most attention, absolutely, was Lewis Hamilton's words, right? Because, look at this guy, right? So he was asked the question, is Newey joining? What's going on? And then I think Crofty then followed up to say, what are the chances of this happening? And he says, yeah, we'll see. Look at this grin on his face, right? Is this the grin of a man that knows something? Because this guy, we know what happens when he joined Mercedes in 2013, and Niki Lauda was saying, look, they're going to build you a rocket ship, it's the place to be, and he felt a similar trajectory happening. He even said, Hamilton, in his announcement when he officially joined Ferrari, that he feels similarly about Ferrari now as he did with Mercedes back then. So did he know something at the time about what was happening here? And is this now closer to likelihood than ever? Because, I mean, he also said if there was a list of people that I'd love to work with, Newey would absolutely be at the top of it. So Hamilton couldn't have been any more bullish on the importance of Newey, the fact that he loved to work with him, the fact that him joining Ferrari is, you know, would be nice to see. I mean, I just had a couple of screenshots here. I imagine this one is probably going to end up on the thumbnail, right? But, I mean, look at this guy. He can't, usually, Lewis, if he wants to be, is pretty poker-faced. But he didn't even get close on this occasion. And when he was asked, would you like to work with Newey? He said, yeah, very much so. Absolutely. Love to have him on board. We'll see if he comes to my team next season. Of course, he gasses up Ferrari and says, look, they made big progress, but, you know, I'd absolutely love to work with Newey. So I don't think any other driver was as kind of on the ball here as Lewis was on this conversation. And MUS are today reporting that basically everything is pointing towards Newey joining Ferrari. Charles and Lewis both openly praising him as a massive asset for the team. Charles actually went on to say, Newey is one of the people I'd love to work with one day. He is one of the engineers who can make a difference. Ferrari is a sought after address at the moment. We're able to win anyone over, he says. And then, you know, this is Alonso's words that I promise you guys, much less euphoric. We already have very good engineers here, and with a newcomer of this caliber, the question always arises to how he will fit into the rest of the team. Adrian is someone who gets the most out of the new regulations, but even he didn't always succeed. So, you know, not wrong from Alonso, but certainly not the same level of conversation that the other guys are kind of talking about him, right? So this sounds to me like someone who probably is not getting Adrian Newey joining their outfit, even if they would try. And it seems like Ferrari is more likely than ever. Or Williams is somehow now a possibility. And this is actually what just came out of Formula Uno as well, that Red Bull is actually trying to downplay the loss of Newey. Now, look, again, Italian press, close to Ferrari, so maybe there are implications to say, look, Newey's obviously a massively important asset, he's going to come to Ferrari, how's it going to work? But interesting to hear that the feeling is in the media that, yeah, Red Bull are downplaying the loss, but actually he was probably more important than they are trying to show. You hear 2023, whereas really it was 2022, but actually even into 2023, the big changes weren't massive, but, you know, the ride heights of the car that they changed, there were massive implications from that, even from 22 into 23, on what that would mean for porpoising, the other effects. The belief is that Newey was very important in setting the right trajectory when they made the RB19 to make sure they adjusted properly to those changes that other teams didn't. And guess what? They produced the most dominant car in terms of race victories in Formula 1 history. The other thing just to mention before we close out the video here on Newey is around when he can actually join Ferrari or Williams or somebody else at that point. That is because he left on the 1st of May officially from the Formula 1 side. The theory was, okay, maybe 12 months of gardening leave. But actually, the truth is, he will be able to be free immediately after he departs Red Bull. We don't quite know yet when, but Adrian Newey and Red Bull have said his departure will come in Q1 of 2025. So that is somewhere between January 1st, 2025 and March the 31st, 2025. So he will be available at the very latest by the 1st of April 2025 to join another team, which would of course give him many, many months indeed to work on their upcoming project. So it may be earlier than that. I mean, it's possible that literally right at the start of next year, 1st of Jan 25, which is the date where the teams are allowed to start working on the new aero regulations, then he will join immediately, or he won't join anywhere, we'll see. But yeah, Hamilton, it would be a privilege to work with him, very much so. I would want Newey at Ferrari, so I don't think it gets any more explicit than this. So very much interested in your thoughts in the comment section below. First practice is today, then there is sprint qualifying this evening. If there's anything particularly interesting, might make another video. Otherwise, we'll see how the timings on content works this weekend. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.